Right, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Change Day 2020. We're here, we're live, we're using technology. We have no idea what's going to happen to us for the rest of the day. I got my fingers crossed, my toes crossed, I've got everything crossed. We're doing this. We've got a very adventurous program of 6 channels. We've got over 50 speakers from all over the world joining us. Why are we doing it this way? Well, we're doing it this way because that's what you wanted to do. Change Day is a grassroots movement. It's a social movement, a social enterprise. We said, how do you want to do Change Day in lockdown? They said, let's have a go at doing it virtually. And these are the topics we want covered. So today it's your day and it's your program. We also said, who do you want to hear from? And unanimously, everybody said, let's hear from the boss. So here he is, Sir Simon Stevens. Good morning, Simon. How are you?
Well, morning, Roy, and morning, everybody. I'm not sure we should say good morning, because certainly in London it is badly overcast. It's pissing down with rain, and it's a reminder that we are heading into the winter season. And so let that not put us off. It's going to be a energizing day, I'm sure. Obviously, previous years we've had the chance to be face-to-face as well as doing the online version of Change Day. But I think this year is unique, to state the obvious. The fact is, this has been the most challenging year in the history of the National Health Service. That's true in this country. It would be true in most other countries as well, I guess. And so I think the point of today probably is not only to take stock about all of the demands and pressures that have been placed on people, but out of extraordinary times come extraordinary change. And that's been no more evident than across the National Health Service, where actually given the chance to get on and make the differences that people can see our patients need with a clear sense of purpose and the permission to do it, we've seen amazing things happening across the NHS. And so the very sort of essence of Change Day is hearing about those things, being inspired by them, and then getting on and doing them much more widely.
I think that's true. I mean, we've been running a program called No Going Back, which has been hugely popular. It's one of the most popular campaigns the Academy's done. And you are right, Simon. I mean, as much as COVID has been an absolute tragedy for families and people and in colleagues, I mean, you know, I think all of us involved with the NHS know someone who's either been ill or lost their lives. And it's been a tragedy. But out of it, there has come a kind of fluidity of management. I talked about managing without boundaries. You know, suddenly people have been able to find ways of working together, and it's almost an anarchy. I mean, I'm sure, looked out of the window from Whitehall, you must think, oh my God, you know, people are doing things. But you know, for years and years, I've trod the boards and taught at universities and talked about change, and I've said people love change if they think they're in charge, and you know, and people have said, yeah, of course, Roy, yeah. Okay, what else? But of course, this time round, people have been in charge. I mean, people in ITUs have been in charge. People on the wards have been in charge. Finance departments have closed up and just delivered PPE. And, you know, the whole people have been in charge of the change and they believed in it. And the real, what I want to come out of this whole COVID experience is, of course, to respect the past, but to take the best of it into the future. And it's how do we nail on these changes? How do we make sure that there is no going back? And it must be very difficult from your desk, because you know you do rely on some bureaucracy, you do rely on systems. You know, you have to do that, otherwise you can't run the organization. I mean, how do you talk to me about how you feel that we can capture some of this stuff and make sure it doesn't go away?
Well, I think some of it, Roy, is about recognizing that there were a unique set of circumstances over the last 6 months, and those set of circumstances might not actually carry on indefinitely. In lots of ways, we don't want them to, but there was a sort of single objective, which was mobilize the health service to deal with coronavirus, while also, of course, continuing to look after many other hundreds of thousands of patients. And I mean, I do think it's worth just nailing this point that even at the height of COVID, you know, in early April, for every coronavirus inpatient in hospital, there were 2 other patients in hospital who weren't there for coronavirus. And yes, it clearly has had a dent on other services, but they are now building back on firing on all cylinders. So we've got to keep reminding people that actually the health service is, of course, here for coronavirus, but it is much broader than that. And it's hugely important that we communicate that to the public. And so part of what we've got to do, I think, is not just rely on the urgency of coronavirus. We've got to get this fast way of working, this sort of clock speed, the permissions for change, as you describe, so that people can see a need and then they can get on and do it. I mean, I'll give you a practical example. I was up at University College Hospitals last week and talking to the team of physios, respiratory nurses, the consultants in the clinic that they've established for long COVID, so-called long COVID, people who maybe 3 months or more having after coronavirus have got a set of health problems that might be fatigue or breathlessness or so-called brain fog. They'd set that service up because they could see a need. The way the finances were structured this year meant that they just got a block of resource and they could move it around without having to worry about were they going to get dinged on a tariff system or something like that. And so creating that space for people to do the right thing, whether it's for coronavirus or other services, that's the thing that we've got to hang on to, I think.
Absolutely. And I'm sure a lot of people are watching and listening to this. We're recording it, so there'll be people watching, after the event will be, relieved to hear you say that. I mean, if you look at, for example, outpatients, there's been a revolution in outpatients now with common sense stuff. I mean, the kind of thing I've been talking about for 40 years has happened in the last 4 months. I've wasted 39 years.
I'm ahead of your time, Roy.
I've condensed everything I've ever wanted to do in the last 4 months. But of course, the issue there is the tariff. They make a fair few quid out of doing outpatient appointments, and it's proper revenue. You suddenly do it in 10 minutes on the phone, and the whole tariff thing changes. I mean, I guess this is what you must be looking at this.
Yeah, which is why we've sort of blown up that financial disincentive to changing clinical practice in a way that makes sense for patients. I mean, I do think there's a broader point here, which is that we've got to. We've moved really quickly to a new default, which is that accessible care by phone or video, particularly for outpatients, as you say, true for a lot of GP appointments as well. And that is amazing. But we do also have to recognise that for some patients, actually, the face-to-face appointment with a trusted health professional is still going to be very important in terms of the interpersonal relationship, in terms of getting the diagnosis right, in terms of being able to monitor and so forth. So I think the point is we don't just want to go from one size fits all arrangement to an alternative one size fits all arrangement. We've got to kind of let it find its own level.
Yeah, creating fluidity. Yeah, creating the fluidity in the system. I was talking to Ed Smith. You recall Ed, he's just written a piece for us in NHS Manage, a very interesting piece, and he's talking about two things. Firstly, it's oxygenating the system, which I think is a lovely phrase. I mean, it's almost onomatopoeic. It tells you exactly what it is: oxygenating the system, letting it breathe, freeing it up. And I thought that was a nice phrase. He also talks about COVID custodians, which came out of a conversation that we had, where we've said there's been so much good.
Like COVID marshals, Roy. I think people might get the wrong idea on that one.
Well, let's see if we can soften the edges of it. What he's saying is that a lot of stuff has been changed, and it would be easy to forget it in the maelstrom of events, but it's worth capturing it to catalogue it, make sure we remember it. So if we're thinking about reorganizing something in the future, we say, what, in COVID, actually, we did this. So we don't forget the good stuff that was done. I think they're two quite nice phrases.
Yeah, no, there are. And look, I think we've also got to be honest about it. A lot of our colleagues have been through an incredibly stressful period where we've actually got, significant levels of burnout amongst some staff, not just those working under very pressurized circumstances in critical care, but other parts of the service as well. And so, the reality is nuanced. We've got to get in place better support for people who are working through what that experience has been like. And yesterday, Prerna Issar and Ruth May and Claire Murdoch announced a big rollout of specialist mental health support for our own staff. But alongside that, as you say, as we've been talking about, Roy, there is a sort of energy, a sort of can-do attitude. And frankly, I think the British public have seen that. And that's one of the things that they've most admired about the NHS. Admittedly, a lot of that has been sort of crystallized by some things that have been a part of, but by no means the central part of the response. Everybody saw the Nightingales. They saw, China having built one field hospital in 12 days. Said, oh, we could never do that here. And actually, we built one far larger in a week. But you know what? That was not really the centrality of what the health service has been doing over the last 6 months. And of course, on cancer care, we've got to make sure that we are getting timely care for patients with cancer. Cancer treatments are now back to actually above the normal level you'd expect at this time of year as people are catching up. Got to work our way through the routine operation.
Sorry to interrupt you. It's slightly awkward on Zoom. That's a really important. Just say that again. We're doing more. That's a piece of good news.
Yeah, we're doing more cancer treatments now than we would do at this time of year. So we've not only got back to normal, but actually the total number of cancer treatments is above normal as cancer services are making sure that patients get the care they need. There was this sort of bump in the road, and that's of concern. And we want to try and ensure that, because we've got coronavirus at such different levels around the country at the moment, unlike March, where it was essentially the country's got to pull a handbrake turn, now we've got a much more differentiated and nuanced approach. I mean, we've still got 6,000 coronavirus patients in hospital beds across England right now. Early September, that was under 500. So the number's going up, but there's a big difference between what it's like in Liverpool today, where Liverpool University Hospitals are going to have more coronavirus patients this week than they had at the peak of the first wave of COVID. Whereas, fortunately, if you're in the southwest of England, the southeast of England, right now there are fewer COVID inpatients in those two regions combined than there are in Greater Manchester. So we've got to be really kind of locally agile in how we respond to these changing needs between COVID and non-COVID over the coming weeks.
We said to people, if you've got a question for Simon, then use the chat and let us know. We've had some people coming in, so do some questions, Simon, if that's okay with you.
Sure.
Interesting one here from Dave Woodruff. Good morning, Dave, wherever you are. Hi. I've got a question, if there's time. Last year I saw Simon and Andy Burnham at Expo. Don't worry, don't panic, Simon. Talk about the climate crisis, being one of the biggest priorities for the NHS. Does Simon think we've gone forward or backwards in this goal in the last 12 months? I don't care what you say. I think we've probably gone forward in reducing the carbon footprint because nobody's gone anywhere. But what do you think?
Yes, I think in the very short term that's true, Roy. Although actually there are some other sort of offsets on that. I mean, you think about the huge necessary requirement for PPE. A lot of that is
we just burned it all.
Stuff in from China, I mean, I think behind Dave's question, there's the more fundamental point is we, the NHS, are 4 or 5% of the carbon emissions of this country, and therefore, if this country is going to play its part in becoming carbon net neutral, then the NHS is going to have to play our part. Actually, as Dave may know, but everybody else might not, we've had since January a expert panel commission looking at how we could decarbonise the entirety of the NHS, and they published their report a couple of weeks ago, chaired by a guy called Nick Watt, an Australian doctor in London who's done a brilliant piece of work, which the NHS England board endorsed in the last couple of weeks. And that essentially says, look, here's the practical steps that the NHS would need to take over the next several decades in order to get carbon net neutral. Our carbon footprint's down by over 60% since the sort of baseline measurement began, but we've got a date for when we get to 80% and 100%, and that's a whole range of things we're going to have to do. We're going to have to, as we build these new hospitals and deal with some of the old facilities across the NHS, build in green. We're going to have to work with our supply chain, not just medicines and pharmaceuticals and asthma inhalers and anesthetic gases and all the rest of it, to make sure that they play their part. The move towards digital appointments and telephone, as against all of these, whatever it is, billions of road miles that the NHS and our patients and visitors do each year.
Yeah, I mean, if we stop outpatients coming and getting them on the FaceTime or whatever, that make a big difference. Look at
that excellent sort of roadmap that Nick Watt and crew have published.
In the IHM, we have a very good green group, as we call them, who are working on this, and I think we actually are very fortunate. We have someone from your office actually who's actually part of that group. So it's a very popular strand of management for IHM managers. It's something that's far higher up the list of things than I would have actually have imagined. Let me go to another question if I can. I just want to find. There we go. Sorry, they've just flipped over on my screen. Right, Sarah Reed from Southern Health. Hi, good morning, Sarah. With the rapidly emerging increase in the need for mental health support, can we ensure our patients get a seamless journey through mental health service without falling into mental health crisis, falling in the gaps? We need to join up our mental health service where we take responsibility for ensuring they get the best care, rather than pass them off to another part of the mental health service and it's not our job and blah blah. I mean, it's an age-old management issue, isn't it? It's interfaces. I remember talking about tripping over paving stones on a patio, perfectly flat, perfect paving stones. You trip over the gaps. It's the same in management.
Yes, well, thank you, thanks, Sarah. I mean, the first thing to say, I think, is a big thank you to staff across mental health services as well. Over the last 9 months, a lot of the media focus has been on the amazing work that's been happening in, critical care, but actually mental health services have put on new ways in which people have been able to get looked after over the last 9 months with just the same sort of creativity as the rest of the health service. That said, I think, let's be frank, the first thing is that for some patients with severe mental illness, their care has been disrupted, and it's very important that we act alongside those patients. And I've been talking to mental health nurses and psychiatrists within the last several days about how we best do that. And then the second thing is that over and above that, we've got new mental health needs. We've got people whose mental health has been affected by social isolation, by lockdown, by the inability to sort of interact with friends and family in the normal way. And I think the truth is that the exact size and shape of that unmet mental health, that new mental health need, is still quite unclear. There's a distinction between mental health distress and mental health disorder, and some of that will require formal services to be provided. And so we're working closely with not only the mental health services, with the Royal College of psychiatrists, and with the patients' charities, Mind and Rethink and others, on what that looks like. But I think we will need to enhance the mental health offer as a result of what's happened over the last 9 months. And then I suppose
it's kind of redefined, isn't it?
But the third point I would say, Roy, is that I think the point that both you and Sarah are making around the join up of services, I mean, that is as important between physical and mental health as it is between primary and secondary care, or between health and social care. I've sort of talked about those as the triple integration, if you like, which is jargon really, just meaning if you are in a A&E department and you're there because you're in a mental health crisis, obviously you should not be waiting many hours to get the supports that would otherwise have been available if you were there for a heart attack or a stroke. And so joining up the way in which mental health services and the physical health services, including in ED, operate is hugely important. That's why, by the way, we got this big program of extending liaison psychiatry into all major EDs, which has now been done, and getting the bulk of those services operating 24/7, which they now are.
Well, that's another piece of good news. Let's emphasize that. Just say that again so everybody clocks that one.
Yeah, so a couple of years back, we had a situation where we really had quite patchy psychiatric services in the A&E departments themselves, so-called liaison psychiatry. We've now got just about every A&E department with liaison psychiatry, and the vast majority of them are now operating 24/7.
That's good news. And I guess it's true, Simon. I mean, I sense that, you know, when we had the first wave of COVID, or however you want to call it, none of us knew what to expect. Everybody rolled up their sleeves and they just kind of did it head down, not knowing, you know, really what was going to come. We just did whatever we needed to do. Now, of course, people have got a bit of an idea what's going to happen next. If it is, you know, if things go the way the numbers are going, we kind of know and that's a good thing and a bad thing, because firstly, it says, well, you know, we could be that much more organized, but also this puts a huge responsibility on leadership, I think, to say to people, we know what's coming. Okay, we're going to do this again. We can do it together. We've marched the troops up the hill. They've come back down again. We've got to march them up again. And that puts a huge, huge responsibility on our leaders to inspire and give confidence to people to do all that again.
It does. And as you say, Roy, we've learned a lot, both good and bad, from the last 9 months. So we're not looking for, you know, we're not looking for a rerun of wave one of COVID. And in some respects, our task is more complicated, because we're also, now that we're seeing this difference across the country, different local areas have got to respond differently, because we know now that what we didn't know in mid-March, which is that, you know, we're not likely to see every single hospital bed in the NHS taken up with coronavirus, which, you know, some of the predictions coming out of the epidemiologists in mid-March were that we could end up with, you know, more than 90,000 patients on a ventilator. We only got 100,000 hospital beds across the whole of the NHS. So, you know, that was a very scary and uncertain time. I think we now can be pretty confident we're not going to sort of reach those levels if action is taken. And obviously the big thing is for us as a country to continue to control the amount of coronavirus infection, because, you know, even with a brilliant health service, if you get a lot of coronavirus infection, particularly in the most at-risk groups, then that will produce more illness and death. That's just sadly a medical fact. So we've got to learn those lessons, and we've got to sustain the wide range of services that the NHS would normally offer, while going into the usual winter with all of the pressures that brings. Yeah. So this is going to be a very, very complex and challenging 6 months, I would say. I mean, we've got some good news on that, which is that we now know a lot more about how to treat COVID patients. So we've had these brilliant randomized controlled trials happening across the NHS, the first to prove that steroids cut death rates for severely ill patients. So when, you know, Donald Trump got his cocktail of medicines, the one that actually been proven to reduce your chance of dying were the ones that have been tested in the NHS. I'm not sure I heard him say that, actually, but that's a fact.
I think that's the last thing he'd say.
Indeed. And we've got, you know, tests going on with antibody cocktails. We know that anticoagulants work in intensive care and so on. So, you know, that's the good news. We got a vaccination program to deliver, no doubt, and so forth. So, look, we got a lot of work on it.
So we're going to hurry you along because we've only got 7 minutes left, and I'm on pain of death. I have to finish on time today because we've got such a complicated program. I just love the headline: "The NHS saved Donald," which I'm looking forward to seeing that on CNN. Right, I've got a question here from Sahid Sadar. Sahid, good morning. A question for Simon. From your perspective, what particular innovations do you view as being here to stay? It comes back to our theme. You know, there's so much that's changed, and the conversations I have with people at the front line, you know, such as I can't travel anymore because I'm too old to go out, and by the time this is over, I'll be too old to want to go out. But anyway, the conversations I have, a lot of people are saying, you know, we can't let this go. We must carry on doing this kind of stuff. And so Saeed, I think wants to nail that on your list of things to do and say, you know, what do you view as being here to stay?
Well, I mean, it's a great question, Saeed, and it's one that's almost impossible to answer, because if you look at the sort of amazing set of ideas and innovations that bubble up through the Academy of Fabulous Stuff, the agenda that's set out today for Fab Change Day. I mean, any one of them, you would look, if you're a patient with rheumatoid arthritis, you'd want the innovations that are there. If you're a patient with cystic fibrosis, you would want the new medicines that we've been able to negotiate a deal for that potentially have a transformative effect on your whole life. So I think in a way the answer is not which specific service change is the best of the lot. The change we want to keep is how we bring about change. And so it's kind of one step removed, as it were. It's giving space for people to see a need, think about how we could do it differently, bang a few heads together, bring people with you, and not have all of this kind of stuff above you, sort of bearing down on you and stopping you getting it done. In other words, trying to enable people to succeed with the system, not despite the system.
I like that. If you're looking for a chief executive for the Banging Heads Together department, I'd like to volunteer. Right, Amanda Reynolds. Good morning, Amanda. Thank you for joining us. I'm just going to abbreviate your question, if I may. She's talking about burnout in staff and how we're going to, how do you think we can support staff through, again, another bout of a difficult time.
Well, as I said, Amanda, I mean, there are some, specialist services which are going to be available for staff with the sort of most substantial needs. But actually, what I've seen in not just hospitals, but primary care teams, community nursing teams, and other, the thing that make a difference are, for example, at the end of a shift, having a short period where staff can just decompress, can talk about what they've just been through, and in a way can, it sounds a bit sort of glib, but sort of park what they've been dealing with before they go home, rather than taking that home with you and having to kind of, live that while also interacting with family and so forth. And
well, if I could just interrupt you, we had a great share on the Academy called Wobble Rooms, where a trust, it's like a staff restroom really, but it was a neat title. It came with a very good narrative, and if you want things to stick, you need, a narrative and titles. It really worked, and it's absolutely gone through the whole of the NHS, where and people have contributed things like perfume and books and music, and it's exactly what you say. It's like a decompression chamber for staff. They've been very, very popular. If I may, I've got a question from Jenny Negus. Good morning, Jenny. Thank you for joining us. She's up in Lincolnshire. Many COVID survivors will undoubtedly be considered as having long-term conditions due to the protracted recovery time. Have we thought about the increase in demand and community support? I know you made an announcement, didn't you? Was it yesterday or the day before, about a long-term COVID? Perhaps you'd like to tell us about that.
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. You're quite right about that. And in fact, I mean, even amongst my colleagues here, I've got two members of staff who have clearly got so-called long COVID. It's a real thing. It looks as if perhaps 10% of people who've had coronavirus have lingering symptoms for at least 3 months after having had COVID. And then a smaller minority, some estimates say about 60,000 people across the country at the moment, have got symptoms that persist 3 months and beyond. And so what we need is the ability to have multidisciplinary assessments for patients who are in that category. We've got to get the sort of case definition, the medical case definition right. So NICE are doing that, and they're going to publish that by the end of the month. And then we've got to have sort of easily accessible assessment clinics and specialist referral pathways that patients can then be offered subsequent to that. So as Roy said, making available 10 million for the balance of the year to kick those off. A number of parts of the country, I'm not sure about Lincolnshire, but a number of parts of the country have already kind of established those, sometimes out of the community health services, sometimes out of the hospital specialist services, maybe primary care. But we want to kind of get a degree of standardization around what that public offer looks like and make sure for those 60,000 plus patients, they're getting that care.
Just looking at the time, knowing Jenny Negus very well, I can reassure you that if there's something to be set up, Jenny will be setting it up and send us the money. Just give her the money. Right, Simon, we got about 45 seconds left. Otherwise, I get the sack for overrunning my time. You've got 45 seconds to send us away with a happy heart.
Well, thank you, Roy, and thank you, everybody. And I think it's going to be a fantastic day today. I think, you know, we're all incredibly busy, but these are inspiring opportunities to hear from our fantastic colleagues. I think the obvious point to end on is that I think the rest of the country knows just how brilliant everybody is on this call. The upswelling of support for the NHS is entirely deserved. And what's more, we're seeing it in the attitudes of young people who are thinking about how they want to spend their professional lives. So the numbers of young people who are wanting to sign up for nurse education, for therapists, for other services, I mean, it's really, you know, we're blowing the barn doors off it. So I think we're going to have the highest intake for undergraduate nursing that we've had for, you know, more than 10 years this year. People want to come and be part of what you are doing. So for that, congratulations and thank you.
Simon, thank you so much for sparing us the time this morning. Good luck with what's ahead. Keep well and keep in touch. Thank you very much, Simon. From us all at the Academy of Fabulous Staff, thank you.